she said. You're tempting me. But she was the one who leaned closer. She said it like she was warning me, but her voice never left the quiet space between us. You're tempting me. I should have laughed it off, pretended I didn't hear. But then she leaned in, not much, just enough that I felt the air shift. It wasn't me moving closer. It was her. And in that small, almost invisible distance closing, everything changed. We were sitting at the edge of her kitchen table. The evening had dragged longer than either of us planned. A half-empty glass of wine stood between us, and the clock on the wall ticked far too loud for how still we were. She was older, mid-40s, composed in a way that didn't need announcing. The kind of composure that made people straighten their backs when she walked into a room. But in that moment, she wasn't polished. Her hair fell loose around her face, the sleeves of her sweater pushed back, fingers circling the rim of her glass like she couldn't figure out what to do with them. I talked too much? I always did. Filling silence was easier than waiting in it. She, on the other hand, let words trail off, left questions hanging, made me notice the space I was taking up. Tempting, she repeated softer, like she was testing the sound of the word, not its meaning. I didn't answer. My throat was tight, and anything I said would sound wrong. I just watched her hand pause on the glass, then lift, then hesitate halfway. She wasn't drinking. She was buying time. Her eyes flicked to mine. Just for a second. Then down again. The kitchen light hummed overhead, a little too harsh, but it caught the faint line at the corner of her mouth when she pressed her lips together. Not a smile. Not yet. I shifted in my chair, leaned forward without meaning to. The wood creaked beneath me, and her gaze snapped back, catching me in the act. You shouldn't, she murmured, though she didn't move away. The words carried weight, but her body didn't follow them. Her elbow rested on the table, leaning just enough to erase the safe distance between us. Her perfume, faint, not deliberate, drifted across the inch of space that now felt impossible to ignore. You don't mean that, I said before I could stop myself. Her laugh was short, caught in her throat, like it wasn't supposed to escape. She tilted her head, studying me with that half-amused, half-exasperated look she always carried when I pressed too far. But she didn't deny it. Instead, she let silence hang, long enough that I could hear the clock again, steady and merciless. I realized then that it wasn't me pushing this forward. I was reckless, yes, 20-something and restless, but she was the one leaning closer, letting her voice drop low, letting her words hang heavier than they should. Her fingertips brushed the table, absent, circling nothing. Mine tightened around the edge of the chair, fighting the urge to close the last inch. Her eyes finally steadied on me, unblinking, like she'd decided something she wasn't ready to admit. You're too young, she whispered. It wasn't rejection. Not even a boundary. More like she was testing how it sounded aloud. The way you say something just to hear if it feels true. And maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. All I knew was that she hadn't pulled back. Not once. I breathed in, shallow, my voice low enough it barely carried across the table. Then why are you still here? The question hung between us, unfinished, like the night itself. And she still hadn't moved away. She was the one who finally stood, breaking the stillness. The chair scraped the floor as she moved, and for a second, I thought she'd end it there, retreat to her bedroom, leave me at the table with the clock and the half-finished wine. But instead, she walked to the sink, set her glass down, and turned the water on too strong, as if the noise might drown out everything unsaid. Her shoulders squared when she stood, softened as she leaned on the counter. Not tired, not careless. Just human. I sat there, hands useless, watching the way her hair fell forward, how she brushed it back only to let it tumble again. It was a small thing, but it felt too intimate, like I was seeing her when no one else usually did. You should go, she said without looking at me. I almost rose. Almost. But the words fell brittle, like a fence she built just high enough to test if I'd climb. Do you really want me to? I asked. Her silence was longer this time. She let the water run, then turned it off. Her reflection in the dark window above the sink caught my eyes, her lips pressed together, her brow drawn, a woman weighing her own command. Finally, she sighed. It's late. That's all. I should have let it go. But the quiet stretched until it was unbearable, so I asked the thing I wasn't supposed to. Why does it bother you? Her hand tightened on the edge of the counter. Not anger. Not quite. Just tension. You're young, she said, echoing what she'd whispered earlier. Too young for this. This? I repeated. She turned then, facing me, eyes sharp as if she wanted to cut the word in half. But her arms crossed, pulling her sweater tighter, like she was shielding herself more than scolding me. I've made mistakes, she said softly. Ones that don't disappear just because someone looks at me the way you do. The way I looked at her. She said it like a weight. I didn't deny it. Couldn't. I had never asked much about her past. She wasn't the type to hand out details. But I knew she'd been married once, maybe twice. I'd overheard something about her son, grown and living far away. And loneliness, that much I could see even when she tried to mask it with calm, with control. She carried it like perfume, faint but impossible to ignore once you were near. When she moved back toward the table, she walked slower, more deliberate, as if every step risked exposing her. She didn't sit down right away. Instead, she paused behind me, close enough that I felt the shift in the air, close enough that her breath touched the back of my neck. My hands went still. You don't know what you're doing, she whispered. But the hesitation in her voice betrayed her. I turned slightly, and her hand brushed my shoulder, just the edge of her fingers, like an accident. Except she didn't pull away fast enough. The touch lingered, softer than it should have, warmer than it should have. She pulled back then, finally, almost too quickly, like the contact burned her. I swallowed hard, tried to steady my voice. I know enough to notice you're the one who leaned closer. Her breath caught, and for the first time that night, she didn't have a ready reply. The clock ticked on, steady and merciless. She sat down again, this time across but not far, her knees almost brushing mine under the table. Her hands folded in front of her, knuckles pale with restraint. You shouldn't make this harder, she murmured. And yet, she didn't move her knees back. We talked after that, but not about what mattered. She asked about my classes, my work, small things that sounded like distractions. But her voice dipped low on certain words, and I caught the way she glanced at my mouth when she thought I wasn't looking. I answered too quickly, too much, just to keep her there, just to keep her speaking. At one point, my hand brushed hers when I reached for my glass. She froze. So did I. But neither of us moved away. That pause, longer than a touch should be, longer than a mistake should last, said more than any confession. By the time I left that night, the air between us was charged, unspoken, but undeniable. She didn't kiss me, didn't even hug me goodbye. But her hand lingered on the doorframe as I stepped out, her fingers brushing mine one last time. Not by accident. Not entirely. And that small contact, almost nothing at all, was enough to make me certain this wasn't over. Her living room was dim except for the lamp by the couch. I shouldn't have been there again, not this late, not after the way we left things the last time. But she hadn't told me to stay away either. We sat close, not touching, but the space between us felt fragile. A book lay open on the coffee table, though either of us had read a single line. Her phone buzzed. She stiffened. The name on the screen lit up, and she flipped it over too quickly. I didn't ask, but I caught the tension in her jaw. Whoever it was, she didn't want me seeing. You should answer, I said, though my voice was quieter than I meant. She shook her head. Not now. The silence grew heavier. I could hear my own pulse, quick and uneven. She reached for her glass of water, her hand brushing too close to mine. Either of us pulled back. Her eyes flicked to me. Sharp. Warning. But they didn't move away. You can't keep looking at me like that, she said. I swallowed, leaning closer without thinking. Like what? Her breath caught. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Finally, she said, "Like you know me." The knock on the door was sudden. Loud. She jerked upright, almost spilling her glass. My body tensed before I even knew why. "Relax," she whispered quickly, standing, smoothing her sweater. "It's probably just—" Another knock. Louder this time. Her neighbor's voice carried through the wood. "You home? Thought I saw your light." Her eyes widened at me, then back at the door. She pressed a finger to her lips. I froze where I sat, every nerve burning. "Just a minute!" she called, too bright, too casual. She hurried to the door, cracked it open, blocking the inside with her body. A few muffled words passed, something about a borrowed tool, a promise to drop it by tomorrow. Her laugh, forced, brittle, drifted back to me. When she finally shut the door, she leaned against it, exhaling hard. "That," she said, her voice low and sharp, "is exactly why this can't happen." But she didn't send me away. She walked back, slower this time, her steps deliberate. I shifted, making space beside me, and she sat down again, closer than before. Her knee brushed mine. "Accident. Maybe. You think it doesn't matter what people say," she murmured, staring straight ahead. "But it does. It always does." I turned, watching her profile, the set of her mouth, the tension in her shoulders. I wanted to reach out, to touch, to prove she was wrong. But my hands stayed locked in my lap. "Maybe I don't care," I whispered. She looked at me then, really looked, eyes searching like she was testing how much truth I could carry. Her hand lifted halfway, hesitated, then brushed against my wrist. A small contact, but it lit through me like fire. She let it stay. For 1 second. 2. Then she pulled away, fingers trembling as she tucked her hair back. "You don't know what you're asking," she said. The air between us throbbed with silence. I leaned in, too close now, close enough to see the faint scar near her temple, close enough to feel her breath graze my lips. My heart hammered so loud I swore she could hear it. Her eyes half closed. Her mouth parted barely. But just as quickly, she turned her head away, a sharp inhale breaking the moment. I pulled back, breathless, my body rigid with restraint. She whispered, not looking at me, "We can't." And yet, she didn't move her knee from mine. The line we hadn't crossed hung between us, trembling, fragile. Closer than ever. Still resisting. But not for long. The storm outside was sudden, heavy, rain slamming against the windows like fists. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied again. We were alone in the sound of it, the thunder muffled, the air sharp with the smell of wet pavement drifting in through the cracked window. She stood by the glass, arms crossed, staring out into the blur of water. I couldn't stop watching her, the line of her back, the way her shoulders sloped when she thought no one was looking. "Storms don't scare me," she said softly, almost to herself. I rose anyway, stepping closer until I was behind her. "Didn't say they did." She laughed, small, almost bitter. "You think you know me." "I do." She turned then, too quickly, her eyes meeting mine. The look was sharp, but it cracked at the edges, like something inside her had snapped from holding back too long. "You don't," she said louder now, her voice trembling in ways she never allowed. "You don't know what it's like, people whispering, judging. I lived through it once. I won't do it again." Her breath came fast. Mine matched it. "Then why do you keep me here?" I asked. My voice was low, raw. "Why do you let me sit this close, why do you?" I cut myself off, because she'd stepped closer. Too close. The storm raged behind her, but the only thing I heard was her uneven breathing, the brush of her sweater against my arm. Her hand lifted unsteady. She touched my jaw, light, almost a test. Then, with a sharp exhale, she dropped it. "This is wrong," she whispered, but her body didn't move away. I caught her hand before it fell completely. My thumb grazed the inside of her wrist, her pulse frantic beneath my touch. "Then tell me to go." Her lips parted. No sound came. The lamp buzzed faintly in the silence. I raised my hand, slow, deliberate, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch. Her eyes closed, her breath catching as my fingers lingered against her temple. When she opened them again, they were softer. Unshielded. "You don't know what you're doing," she repeated, but this time it sounded less like a warning, more like a plea. "Then show me," I whispered. Her chest rose sharply. She leaned in before she realized she had, her forehead almost grazing mine. The heat of her breath slid across my lips, her perfume mixed with rain-soaked air wrapping around me until I couldn't think straight. I wanted to close the space. Every muscle screamed for it. But she spoke first. "I can't lose myself in you," she said, the words trembling. "I can't." I swallowed, voice breaking low. "Then don't. Just let go for a second." Her hand pressed flat against my chest now, not pushing, not pulling. Just resting there, feeling the wild thud of my heartbeat. Seconds stretched. Thunder cracked, and she startled, collapsing against me for the briefest instant. My arms went around her instinctively. She didn't pull away. Her head rested against my shoulder, her breath hot against my neck, her fingers curling lightly in my shirt. "You're dangerous," she whispered. "Say the word." I murmured back, my lips so close to her ear it was almost a kiss. "I'll stop." The silence after was unbearable. And then, she turned slowly, her face tilting up to mine. Her mouth hovered a breath away, her eyes wide, burning. The storm roared outside. We were one heartbeat from crossing everything. The storm had passed by morning, but the air in her living room was heavier than the night before. We hadn't kissed, not exactly. We'd come close, too close, but she had pulled back at the last second, her body trembling against mine. Now daylight spilled through the window, too honest, too sharp. She moved around the room like nothing had happened, collecting cups, straightening the blanket on the couch, avoiding my eyes. I sat there, hands clasped, heart still raw from how close we'd come. Finally I said it. "You wanted to." She froze mid-step, back to me. The way her shoulders stiffened was all the answer I needed. "I didn't," she said after a pause, voice thin. "Don't lie." Her hands tightened around the edge of the blanket. She turned slowly, her expression caught between anger and exhaustion. "Do you think this is easy for me?" she asked. Her voice cracked on the last word. She pressed her lips together hard, as though she regretted letting it slip. I rose from the couch, moving toward her. She stepped back once, but only once. "What aren't you telling me?" I asked. Her eyes darted to the side, toward her phone on the table. My stomach sank. "Is there someone?" She shook her head quickly, too quickly. "Not like that." "Then what?" The silence stretched. She let it, the way she always did, leaving me to fill it. But this time she was trembling, her hands clasped too tightly in front of her, her breath uneven. Finally, she whispered, "My son called last night." That hit harder than I expected. "You didn't answer," I said, remembering the phone lighting up. Her nod was small, guilty. "He's visiting next week. He worries about me. He thinks I'm lonely." She laughed then, bitter and short. "If he knew you were here." Her words cut off. She shook her head. I stepped closer again. She didn't move this time, though her hands clenched tighter. "So what?" "I'm not ashamed." Her eyes snapped to mine, wide, sharp. "You should be." The space between us was electric again, but colder this time, more dangerous. "You're tempting me," she whispered, echoing the first night. But now her tone was heavier, almost desperate. "And if he finds out, if anyone finds out..." Her voice broke. She turned away quickly, brushing past me, so close I felt her arm graze mine. I caught her wrist before she could move further. Her pulse leapt under my fingers. "Stop running from this," I said, my voice low, rough. She spun back, her face inches from mine. Her eyes shone, not just with anger but something rawer, deeper. "You don't understand," she hissed. "I already lived through people tearing me apart once. My marriage, the whispers, the judgment. I won't do it again. I can't. Her hand shook as she pulled free, pressing it flat against her own chest as if to steady her heart. I stared at her, at the way she trembled even as she tried to look strong. And then I said it before I could think better. I think about you all the time. The words landed heavy. Her breath caught. Her body swayed forward, barely noticeable, like she was being pulled. She closed her eyes, whispering, "Don't say that." But I could see the truth in the way her fingers curled, the way her lips parted as though they wanted to meet mine. The air was too charged to stand still. She moved past me again, but slower this time, brushing against me deliberately, as if testing how much I could take. Her shoulder grazed my chest, her hair brushing my jaw, and it left me shivering. "You need to leave," she said. I didn't move. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to me. For a moment the mask slipped. I saw longing, fear, and something dangerously close to surrender. "I'll leave," I said, stepping closer until she had to tilt her head up to look at me. "But not for long." Her lips parted, and she whispered, almost too quietly to hear, "Then don't make me wait." The night was quiet again, the storm long gone, but the silence between us had its own weight. I stood by the door, one hand on the knob, pretending I was ready to leave. She lingered across the room, arms folded, though her shoulders sagged like she'd been carrying too much. It should have been simple: go, and nothing would happen. Stay, and everything would. But nothing about us had ever been simple. "You keep saying I should leave," I said, my voice low. "But you never let me go." Her breath caught. She pressed her lips together, then shook her head, almost pleading. "You don't know what you're asking me to risk." I stepped closer, just a few feet, slow enough for her to stop me. She didn't. "What if I'm asking you to stop pretending?" Her eyes glistened in the lamplight. For once, she didn't look away. The air grew tight, thick, like the room itself had narrowed to hold only us. I moved another step closer until she was just inches away. Her chest rose quickly, uneven, and I could hear the shallow tremor of her breath. "Don't," she whispered, though the word was softer than resistance. I raised my hand, slow, deliberate, and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. My fingers lingered against her cheek longer than they should have. Her eyes fluttered closed. "You're too young," she said again, but the words broke halfway, hollow. "Then why are you still here with me?" I whispered back, so close my lips almost brushed her temple. Her hands hovered at her sides, fists unclenched, trembling as though deciding whether to push me away or pull me closer. Finally, one hand lifted, hesitant, and rested lightly against my chest. The warmth of her palm burned through me. "This isn't fair," she murmured, her voice shaking. "I'm supposed to know better." "Maybe that's why I need you," I said. Her head tilted barely an inch, enough that her forehead nearly touched mine. The nearness made every second unbearable. I could feel her breath, quick, uneven, ghosting across my lips. "You'll regret this," she whispered. I swallowed hard, my voice breaking low. "Not for a second." Time slowed. Every detail burned into me: the faint scent of her perfume, the warmth radiating from her skin, the way her hand clutched tighter at my shirt as if she couldn't let go even if she wanted to. Then, finally, she made her choice. She leaned in, closing the space. Her lips brushed mine, not a full kiss, not yet, but enough to shatter every wall she tried to keep between us. A trembling, fragile contact, heavy with everything unsaid. When she pulled back, her eyes opened slowly, searching mine. There was no denial left. No excuse. Just raw, human truth. "I can't fight this anymore," she whispered. My chest loosened, breath rushing out. I touched her face with both hands now, holding her like she might vanish. "Then don't," I said. The kiss that followed wasn't polished or careful. It was messy, uncertain, a clash of hesitation and hunger. Her hands gripped my shoulders, mine anchored her close, and for the first time, we stopped resisting. When we finally broke apart, foreheads resting together, the silence felt different. Not heavy. Not unfinished. We both knew. There would be consequences, risks, whispers. But none of it mattered in that moment. For the first time, we understood each other completely. And neither of us stepped back. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rainwater still dripping from the gutters outside. We stayed close, still holding on to each other like the moment might slip if we loosened our grip. Her forehead rested against mine, our breaths tangled. For once, neither of us filled the silence with excuses. Finally, she pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes searched mine, steady this time, though I saw the faint shine of fear still tucked in the corners. "I've been afraid of this from the start," she admitted. "Afraid of being judged, of you regretting me one day." Her thumb traced lightly along my jaw, as if the touch itself steadied her. "But when I'm near you, I can't remember why I'm supposed to resist." I closed my hand over hers, pressing it tighter against my face. "I'm not going anywhere. Not tomorrow, not when people talk, not when it gets complicated. You don't scare me. Not even a little." A small, broken laugh slipped from her. Relief, maybe? Or disbelief. She sank into me then, arms winding around my shoulders. I wrapped her close, holding her tighter than before. She fit against me like she'd always been there, and I realized how wrong it had been to think of us as impossible. We didn't rush into anything. We just stood there for a long time, the weight of every hesitation melting away in the warmth of the embrace. When she finally pulled back, she didn't go far. She stayed close enough that our bodies still brushed, her hand sliding down my arm until her fingers found mine. Her grip was tentative at first, testing, then firmer, like she'd made her decision. "I'm too old for games," she said quietly. "If this happens, it has to be real." "It already is," I answered, squeezing her hand. Her smile was small, but it reached her eyes this time. We ended up on the couch, not side by side but pressed together. Her head rested against my shoulder, her hair soft against my neck. I traced idle patterns along the back of her hand with my thumb, grounding both of us in the quiet. The world outside might not understand. Her son might ask questions. Neighbors might whisper. But in that moment, none of it mattered. For the first time, she wasn't pulling away. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was chasing something just out of reach. We sat in the stillness, our bodies warm against each other, and it felt like an answer. Before the night gave way to dawn, she tilted her face up and pressed a soft kiss to my temple. Not hurried. Not hesitant. Just hers. "You've undone me," she whispered. I turned to face her fully, brushing my lips against her forehead in return. "Good," I said, my voice rough but certain. "Because I'm not letting you go." Her eyes closed as she let out a deep breath, leaning fully into me. And for the first time, either of us fought the closeness. There was no more distance left to hold.